Hi everyone and welcome back to another Win with Armagh podcast. We're looking ahead to the Ulster Championship quarter-final coming up this weekend. It's Armagh taking on Fermanagh in Brewster Park in Enniskillen on Saturday evening. I'm delighted to be joined by Ronan Gallagher, former Fermanagh goalkeeper and now a Madden man through and through. So he's the best man to talk about this game. Ronan, a big weekend for yourself, I suppose, living in Armagh and supporting Fermanagh?
Yeah, massive weekend. I suppose my wife and my children are all avid Armagh fans and have been for a long time, and the children are just loving the last few years here in Armagh. But no, I'm very much Fermanagh man, so yeah, I would get a bit of ribbon out at school in Middletown there from a few of them about where's my Armagh colours, but it's hard, when you're from Fermanagh and that's what you love,
To be fair, I think I do remember seeing an image of you putting up colours and stuff in 2024. You were sort of forced into it.
I was nailed all right in the lead up to the 2023 Ulster final. I was at Derry, obviously, and yeah, we put up the Armagh button, and one of my parents just snapped me up, so it was snapped me putting up the button. But sure, look at the children. What Armagh has done the last. I suppose they've always a good sport, but what they've done for the children of the county over the last few years is astronomical. The children in school just absolutely love it, both football and hurling, and they're just football mad and go to all the games, the away games and everything. So, it's just brilliant for the young people of Armagh at the minute anyway, for sure.
When we're talking about Armagh and Fermanagh, Ronan, there's big games in the past that obviously come up. 04's the sore point for Armagh, 08 maybe the sore point for yourselves, the Ulster final. I think I was chatting to you before and you sort of said like if Fermanagh could swap things, they would nearly take the Ulster title in 08 over the 04 win.
Well, I certainly would anyway, that's for sure. And even going back to 93 here, actually, the famous game where Fermanagh were maybe 9 points up, and I was at it actually with my father, and Dennis Hollywood came off the bench and scored 2-1 he scored, and Fermanagh lost the game. And I remember Hugh McCabe, the Fermanagh manager at the time, being distraught on TV after. But I suppose that the 04 one, look, it's a bit different for me. I was in the squad, but I was kind of detached from it a wee bit. But the 08 thing was just I suppose going back to 04, I suppose it's probably widely agreed Armagh probably took their eye of the ball a wee bit, and everybody in Croke Park that day was talking about Armagh and Tyrone playing in the semi-final, and then Tyrone got scuppered by Mayo as well. But like that day will live long in Fermanagh's history, Tom Brewster's point and how spine-tingling it was. It was just such a massive victory, and then but I suppose look, the 08 was, I tell people all the time, it's something that just kills me every day of my life, just the whole disappointment around it. And it was the one thing that Fermanagh people have always craved for, is an Ulster title, and I suppose we got close, and I suppose like 04 a wee bit, I think we did catch Armagh a wee bit on the hop in 08 on the first day. I remember just watching Armagh and sort of their body language, and they just weren't fully on it the first day, I didn't feel, and we were close to capitalising on it, but we didn't, and fair play to them. They wanted to remember Fiddian scoring a really good goal. He snuck in the back door and put one through my legs that day, and but look, it was massively disappointing, but at the same time, it was an unbelievable week or 2 weeks to be a Fermanagh player that time too,
And more recently, with Armagh going to Enniskillen, thoughts are going back to 2018. And I know, having spoke to players in the past, like I think recently Stephen Campbell told us like that day was a really, really low point, that Fermanagh obviously overturned Armagh in the first round of the championship, 12-7 I think the game ended, and you were involved in the Fermanagh coaching team.
Yeah, and I suppose we had played in the league that year, I think in Brewster Park as well, and it was a draw. And then they pipped us in a bit of a shootout in the league final, which was a bit of shadow boxing. I remember Niall had a brilliant game that day actually. And then I suppose at that time it was the old game. It was dog eat dog. Fermanagh had trained really, really hard. We're in a really good place, mentally, and felt, I suppose, at that time at Brewster Park, you probably didn't fear anybody, at that time. And it was a dog eat dog game, and I remember. Armagh went down to 14 men just short after half time, which was, I suppose, it's not as big a thing now. It wasn't as big a thing then as it is now, going down to 14 men, but we just dogged it out, and I suppose Armagh that time were just beginning to sort of really make steps and strides, and they probably at that time hadn't totally figured out the old game. In terms of breaking down defences and that type of thing. And look, it was in Brewster Park, and it was a fairly toxic environment as well. It was hot and heavy on the sideline and on the pitch and all the rest. But look, it was a good win for Fermanagh. But look, the following year we played them Crosswood Lane on the hockey disc, you know, so they had that figured out at that stage, you know. But often think back at that, and funny, when Armagh won the All Ireland, you know, we'd look back at the players who were about at that time, you know, and like, I mean, what they did in those 6 years was just unbelievable, you know, how they progressed and developed athletically, physically, individually, as a team. Just the entire work they did was amazing, really, when you think back at it, you know. But look, it was a good win for us, and played them in 010 in the championship to beat us as well. Fairly handy. But I suppose over the last sort of 20 or 25 years, Armagh's big rival has obviously been Tyrone and Donegal and all. But from a Fermanagh point of view, we've probably actually played Armagh in more important games to us than any other team, you know. So it's been a mixed bag, put it that way.
The two teams that lined out in that 2018 team, Ronan, Armagh have 10 plus players still involved that went on to win the All Ireland. Instead of Fermanagh maybe pushing on with that team, they've maybe only two on the squad. I know Declan McCusker and I think Kieran Corrigan's maybe the other one. So like, it's a huge turnover for Fermanagh in those 8 years.
It is, but I suppose that's just the natural aging of the team too. You know, I suppose, yeah, you have Decky there and Kieran Corrigan back this year after a couple of years out. He was away travelling and so on. But I suppose the Cullens would have been the last of that too as well. You know, Shane Lee, but a lot of the other boys just were sort of younger or older and just a wee bit further down the road. You know, you'd obviously Connell and Ryan Jones, you know, have pushed on a bit now too in age as well. So it kind of just the natural cycle of the team was coming to an end, and I suppose that particular year, you know, we ended up getting the Ulster final, and it was probably the peak of that team, probably, you know, even though we were well beaten in the final by Donegal, and probably lucky enough to beat Monaghan with that last minute goal. But I suppose that's just the natural cycle, and the Armagh boys were to just be getting their cycle a bit younger, probably across the board, I would say, probably, you know.
Going back to that 2018 game, Ronan, we're chatting about, you said you had met twice in the league. Obviously both teams were competing in Division 3 that time. They both got promoted to Division 2 at the same time. Looking forward to Saturday's game. Obviously Armagh are in Division 1 at the minute. Fermanagh are relegated to Division 4. So league football, there's a big difference in the two teams at this stage.
There is. There's absolutely no question about it. You know, the trajectory of both teams, and like Armagh, you know, probably, you know, they're absolutely in the conversation for the All Ireland and the right end of the competition. You know, us, you know, obviously going to Division 4 is a massive blow. And I'm not trying to pick Armagh up, and I'm just being totally honest about it. Like, you know, the difference currently in the two teams is quite significant. You know, individually, collectively, as a group, you know, it's hard to see us, you know, being in the game without a couple of unusual events. You know, we'll need things to really go for us. And look, that's just the way football has gone now. I suppose, don't forget, that was the old rules as well. Yeah. You know, it was a totally different game. The new game now, it's harder to park the bus, it's harder to stay competitive. You know, it's harder to, you know, stay with teams who are athletically, you know, in a really, really good place. You know, and saying that, you know, the way the scoring works, you know, 8 or 9 points now isn't a safe lead, you know, so there's always that bit of hope. But, you know, there's no question about it for Fermanagh. This weekend it'll be a huge challenge to be in any way competitive, you know.
And we said at the start, obviously you're involved with Madden, and a brilliant historic year for Madden last year, winning the championship for the very first time. Darragh McMullen obviously went on and he won Club Player of the Year. He's carried that form in Armagh. I know he had a niggle at the start of the year, but now he's got game time. He was brilliant in the first half against Tyrone here. Harshly sent off, I'm sure you would agree.
He was.
He's developed into a really key man for Armagh now, and for Fermanagh, they're probably going to have to tag him. And how do you see Fermanagh maybe trying to counteract him?
Yeah, look, that's the big challenge, and I was actually thinking about this during the week. Like, even in Armagh training, who would want to mark him? Yeah. You know, or if it's AVB, if somebody marks DMAC, who marks Connolly then? You know, it's a massive challenge. Look, Fermanagh, you know, Johnny Cassidy would be up there with one of the best man markers that we would have, you know, and certainly would hold his own against most players, you know. The difficulty around it will be, you know, if he goes on Connolly or DMAC, you know, who takes the other one? You know, possibly Ronan McCaffrey, possibly Josh Largo Ellis, maybe, you know, would have the stamina to stick with him. Ronan McCaffrey's been playing, you know, at centre half back for Fermanagh, so you tag DMAC, you know, you're leaving gaps in behind. You know, you tag Conte as well, there's gaps, so suddenly you're into like a man-to-man scenario, and you know, Jesus, Armagh's devastating, you know, going at teams. So, you know, I would say, you know, between probably Johnny Cassidy, you know, probably be my pick to go man marking on one of them anyway, and then, you know, whatever the other one. But look, DMAC's been been unbelievable for him, you know, since, I suppose, going back to that day restarted the league final against Donegal, you know, where maybe things didn't work out for him, you know, but obviously Armagh management saw enough in him to stick with him, and, you know, what he's done this year, and obviously for the club last year, he's just such a top fella, like, you know, couldn't speak highly enough of him, you know.
And what's he like in the changing room and stuff at club level?
He's just brilliant, like, I mean, and certainly it was noticeable this year, you know, he's certainly, you know, a lot more vocal and involved in sort of the leadership of the team, you know, really stepped up to the mark that day. But again, look, it doesn't matter what he says, it's what he does on the pitch is the key thing, and, you know, he's just as a person, he's top end, and we're just lucky to have him, you know, and so are Armagh, you know, because he's some asset to them, and they've guided him well and developed him well to this point, and that'll just continue. He'll just continue to get better, I would say. And
probably one of the highlights of the Tyrone game was his point in the first half where he won the short kick out on his own 21 metre line and carried it the whole way up the field to score. So he can do everything, really.
Look, he has that in the locker. No doubt about it. And that's the challenge for not just Fermanagh but for other teams as well. You know, when they come up against him later in the summer, because as that ground gets harder and sort of and especially, you know, as games go on and it becomes a wee bit looser and there's a wee bit more space, that's when it'll be a big challenge for Fermanagh and for every other team, you know.
And I suppose, just to wrap up, who do you see coming out on top?
Look, I hate to sort of back against my own county, but I just feel it's going to be really difficult for Fermanagh, to be honest. You know, I think look, if things can go their way, if they bring an edge, you know, like I've never played in a Fermanagh team that's competed that didn't have a massive edge. The way the league went, the players I know were hurting, and I know there's a big response in them, and, you know, worked with a lot of them. They're going to have to come with a huge edge in terms of their energy and enthusiasm, just putting everything on the line. I really hope they do that. If they do that, you know, and try and keep it as tight as they can, but geez, the quality Armagh have, like, I mean, it's going to be really difficult. And, you know, if things continue, if they don't start Oshin and Turbo, like, them coming off the bench to a tired Fermanagh defence could be devastating, like, you know. But I think in 24, Soupy maybe started against Fermanagh, and he had been the impact player, so they might see an opportunity to play sort of Oshin from the start, or Conor Turbot. But, you know, just the overall quality that Armagh bring to the table and their psychology around it and how well tuned they are, you know, these days it's hard to see teams having off days, you know. But look, I'll still be cheering for Fermanagh.
Great, Ronan. Thanks for chatting to us. Thank you.
Win £50,000 to spend how you like.
Here at Shelbourne Motors.
You could choose this car.
Or what about this one?
Why not grab two while you're at it?
£50,000 to spend your way at Shelbourne Motors.
It's entirely up to you. One car, two cars, it's your way.
It's a tough one for me, but I'd probably go with this one.
Enter now, tickets are only a £5.